Greetings everyone. In this video, I'll be going over the top 10 things you should know when deciding to build a shed. I recently completed a shed build in a backyard and learned quite a bit by doing it solo, and I want to share this information with you for a couple of reasons. One, so you have a good idea of what to expect when you get started, and two, so you can begin with confidence when you go into your own build. If you'd like to see my shed, I'll be sure to include a link in the description below for you to check it out. Also, if you stay tuned until the end, I'll provide you a completely unexpected bonus, so be sure to check that out as well, as it will surely help alleviate some of the stress associated with taking on a big project like this. With that said, let's get into it with the list of items starting from the least important, being number 10, to the most important at number 1. At number 10, we have crew size. This is a good thing to consider as it will allow for delegation of tasks and different levels of competency within your crew. If you want to make sure everything is done exactly the way you want, and if you want to be involved in the build, it would be a good idea to figure out who you have available and what skills they bring to the table. If you want to be hands-off, then you will want to elect a crew leader that you trust to listen to you and who can actually make things happen. Also, when it is being done by others, there are a few things to consider, such as, will they show up? Are they going to work from bell to bell? Or do they dilly-dally too much? Also, when hiring or volunteering others, it would be wise to set up a start time, breaks and lunch, as well as a set end time so everyone knows the expectations and also when they'll be able to relax or eat for a while. We'll go into more detail later in this video, but with a crew it may be a good idea to identify a set amount of pay versus an hourly amount, and in a moment you'll understand why I'm saying this if you haven't already guessed. Coming in at number 9 is time. This pertains to both the time of year for the work to begin, as well as the amount of time it will take to complete your project. If you're in a rush to have the shed completed because you need to store items immediately, this will be a crucial step in your planning process. However, if you're doing this as a project on the weekends because you work during the weekdays, then it might be stretched out over several weeks, so you can tackle the steps when you're available. Either way, you will want to set up a general outline of steps that are reasonable to accomplish each day so that you can strategize appropriately, and it may help you identify if, in fact, it is something you can do by yourself or if you have to hire a crew, as I previously mentioned. If purchasing a shed kit, more often than not, you can go into the product reviews and other customers will tell you how long it took by themselves or with help. There are additional factors that lend themselves to a faster or slower build, and I will discuss those shortly as well. On to number 8, weather. As I mentioned in number 9, the time of year can certainly be a factor. If it is in the middle of summer in a southern state, you can imagine that the middle of the day is going to be sweltering, and if you have a kit that takes several days or weeks based on your time frame for the build, it can be daunting to have to go out in 110-degree weather, though it's not impossible. The point here is to consider this information and be prepared. Conversely, if you are planning your build in the middle of winter and you live in a colder region, you may have to deal with harsh and bitter cold temperatures, and nobody likes smashing their hands with a hammer at all, and when it's cold outside it seems to hurt a lot more. Spring is nice, but do you have allergies? And will the bugs be out in force? Again, you can easily plan for these things, but it is nice to have these considerations beforehand so that you can do something about it to make your life, or the crew's lives, a little easier. Finally, what about fall? It seems that the wind really picks up in the western region during August to October, and I'm guessing it is the same in most places in the US, or perhaps other countries as well. But either way, if you know when the windy, rainy, hot or freezing weather occurs in your area, it would be a good idea to take a moment to plan how to work through the weather accordingly. Now, at number 7, we have the plans. As I mentioned in the beginning, I recently built a shed, and it was from a kit I purchased on Amazon for a 10 by 12 shed. It included plans with step-by-step instructions that had good pictures for reference. Once I received the kit, I was able to work out an action plan and identify what additional items were required for the build. If you're creating your own plan and cutting all of the wood yourself, then you will likely have a good idea of how much material you need, including any screws, nails, and hardware. If you're like me, the idea of creating your own plan will be daunting, so a shed building kit with pre-cut materials will be the way to go. I made sure to check out the reviews and the items included before the purchase, so I knew what to expect once it arrived. Depending on what kind of shed you get, you may have to purchase items for leveling the ground, painting and roofing, or other things. So take a look and be ready to go shopping after the kit arrives if needed. At number 6, we have the location of the shed. Hopefully, if you intend to build a shed, you already have a pretty good idea of where you want it located based on the size and shape of your particular build. A few things to consider here will be where the sun will primarily hit the shed, and what would be ideal. Will your shed be blocking the view, either favorably or unfavorably? Also, how far is it from the main house or from a fence, which can be an important factor if the main house's windows are nearby, as it could block wanted light, or maybe it can provide some additional privacy from the neighbors. You'll also want to consider how easy it is to access the door if you're building this for storage, as well as security issues if the shed is too remote. If your shed is going to be used as a tiny home or something of that nature, what is your view when you walk out the door, and will it feel intrusive to neighbors? I'll also cover another reason in the next section about why you want to consider how near your shed is to certain objects. Okay, those were some good points. Now let's dive into the top 5, which will be the most important things to think about before you build your shed. Oh, if you think this will be helpful for others, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Apparently that helps my channel, and I'll be sure to provide more tips in the future when I do projects like this. Thank you. Number 5. Permits. If you're going to build your shed on your own property and you are within city limits, it is possible you'll have to obtain a permit for your shed. Consider taking a look around your neighborhood and see what others have already built to get a good idea of what has been allowed, and if you have something similar, it's likely to be acceptable. That doesn't mean don't check with the city, but it will give you a good perspective. Some areas will only allow a shed to go up to the height of a fence, or will have different requirements about how close you can build to a house or a power box. Also, you may have to obtain a permit based on how you build your base, and if it has cement footers or a cement pad. Since I'm not able to tell you your particular requirements, I can only recommend that you look them up online in your area. Oftentimes, you can build your shed with very few requirements, but don't take my word for it. Take the time and look up the rules. Nobody wants to tear down all their hard work because the city gives them the thumbs down after the fact. In this case, permission is much better than asking for forgiveness because fines and additional costs or labor might be the only forgiveness allowed. This takes us to number 4 on the list, materials. There are many different types of sheds out there, from plastic to wood or metal to composite materials, and only you can identify your preference and your means to obtain the material. Something to consider is what the shed's purpose will be. Do you want to keep your lawnmower out of the rain, or are you looking to secure items as additional home storage? What is the longevity you're looking for in this build? Is it temporary and small, or are you going big and want it to last as long as possible? Once you figure out what your purpose will be, and do the research for the size and type of materials, then you can narrow down the choices based on these factors, and as we will cover shortly, the potential costs. It might be a good idea to choose 2 options, and then when you're ready to purchase, you can go with either one based on availability and preference. This avoids disappointment when you put all of your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Coming in at number 3, we have a level foundation. If you're building a shed, the very first and most important factor is going to be the ground it sits on. If it is not level, there are several risks. The shed could collapse if it relies on a square and level foundation to keep it structurally sound. It could also allow for bugs and pests to creep in through any cracks or openings from the uneven ground around the perimeter. If you were building this shed as a tiny home, it would mean that anything inside would not be level and can cause things to move around instead of stay still as you would like it to. It also means that anything you build on the interior would look crooked in order to be level, and if you have a little bit of the CDO like me, that's OCD but with the letters in alphabetical order like they should be, then this would be an absolute nightmare. So, take the time to build a strong foundation with whatever base you choose, and may I recommend to check and double check this several times along the beginning process of your build to ensure there are no troubles. Your future self will really thank you for taking the extra time, I assure you. Down to the top 2. Can you guess what they are? If you think you know, pause the video here and let me know what you think in the comments below before you continue, and then see if you are correct. I'll be glad to congratulate you in a response. Number 2. Tools needed. This can vary widely based on your materials and the extent of your build, but I will share with you the essentials. You might think you need a bunch of power tools to get the job done, but you'd be surprised at what you can do with regular old hand tools. Obviously, you can get the job done faster with those expensive options such as a nail gun, power saw, and drill, but you might not have the power tools or an air compressor, so if that is the case, as in my own build, then you can manage it all with the bare minimum. If I had to pick one power tool to use though, it would be a drill. Because not many people have manual drilling tools for a hole, and though most people do have a screwdriver, when you have to drive in 3-inch screws or longer, that can be extremely cumbersome and tiring. If you look for a drill, you can find one for $50 that you can plug in, or about $100 if you have to get one with a battery and charger. Plus, if you get a better quality drill, chances are you'll use it again in the future, so that might not be too bad. As far as what else you need, here's a list of the basics. A hammer, a level, a set of clamps, tape measure, a triangle or a square as they call it, a pencil, a caulking gun, a paint roller and brush with tray, and some tape if needed, a box cutter with the standard blade, and if you do shingles, you'll want to get a few hook blades too, a shovel, drill bits, a saw, staple gun, and some tin snips. There are other tools that can be used as well if you have them at your disposal, but that will be your personal preference. If I missed anything here, go ahead and let me know so anyone who watches the video can see in the comments too. And finally, the number one thing to consider for your shed build will be the total costs. When purchasing a shed kit with everything included, that makes it very easy to identify the total cost for you. But when you buy a kit without some of the items included, such as the base leveling materials, the paint and the roofing materials, those items will add to the total cost of your shed. Obviously, if you do the build on your own, there's no labor involved. But if you get help from either friends or a hired crew, then you'll want to budget those costs into your total as well. So you're not surprised in the end. As I mentioned way back at the beginning of this list, it may be a good idea to set a price with any laborers ahead of time for the full build, rather than paying out an hourly wage because it adds up quick. Also, you may have bad weather unexpectedly, which could limit the work progress and ultimately cost you more than you had budgeted. It's not a bad idea to set an amount and then inwardly allow for an overage. That way, if you forgot something along the way, there is room for you to still remain within your overall target for the cost of the shed build. The good news is that if you can get the shed up and the roof sealed, then you'll be able to utilize the storage space and potentially get those finishing touches done on a later date. But I'm hoping that after watching this video and taking these top 10 items into consideration, that you'll come up with a plan and that it works out just right. Now, at the beginning of this video, I told you about a bonus at the end that would help you on your build. Hashtag Larry for hire. As my handle suggests, I'm a traveler who lives in a van, And if you want to make arrangements with me to meet you, I'd be glad to set up an appointment to do just that. I can put in the work alongside you, film you doing it yourself, or if you want me to build it for you, we can negotiate that as well. This was such a fun undertaking, and I learned so much by doing it by myself. I would actually enjoy doing it again and again for people who would like me to join them on their project. Just comment down below with "Help me," and we can get in contact directly on my business phone to set up an appointment. Now, I bet that was unexpected. I appreciate you taking the time to view this video in its entirety. I wish you good luck on your build, and I hope to see you out there, making it happen.